extended faculties, as McLuhan called them. But we see that suddenly Walter Pichler starts to deal with that much more critically. And here we see that very well. Here we see a project in which Walter Pichler thinks through the consequence of these prostheses. And it is basically an installation, and maybe you can see it. We would sit on a chair and we would be moved into it. And once we're in this capsule, basically there would be a kind of anesthetic, and one by one our limbs would be amputated. But while they are amputated, we are feeling euphorically. We have the experience, as we can see here, while a leg of the biomodule is being amputated, it may be enjoying a refreshing walk through delightful Hungarian scenery. So here you see that slowly as a kind of body snatcher, this bioadapter, as Oswald Wiener called it, Austrian writer that became a leading a computer scientist afterwards. We see how this body is dismembered at the same time. And so we see here suddenly that this thinking about what these machines do also goes into a very critical domain, very different from archiogram. And what we see also is that the body and the experience of the body and how this experience can be betrayed as well by drugs or other anesthetics plays a central role. So again, if we go to understanding media, why did these architects do that? Marshall McLuhan, he writes that in experimental art, men are given the exact specifications of coming violence to their own psyches from their own counter-irritants or technology. For those parts of ourselves that we thrust out in the form of new invention, our attempts to counter or neutralize collective pressures and irritations. But the counter-irritant usually proves a greater plague than the initial irritant, like a drug habit. And it is here that the artist can show us how to ride with the punch instead of taking it on the chin. It can only be repeated that human history is a record of taking it on the chin. So these installations with these very psychedelic and sometimes extreme experiences are basically a kind of installations that we would undergo, and we would undergo all kind of disturbing experiences, bodily experiences, because we can deal with them rationally yet. And because when we come out, we are stronger, and like a boxer who trains not to take the fist on the chin, but to ride with it, we could learn to deal with this new technology. So here we see how these installations become very sophisticated already as a kind of experiments with the human body. Called Himmelblau, then, to summarize this up, there are two installations that they did. One is this one, it's called Soul Flipper, and you see someone again with a helmet on. This helmet, as you can see, has sensors, and these sensors can feel the kind of grimaces that Arnold Reiner produced. And when these sensors feel these grimaces, they produce effects in light and sound. So that's one thing. That's how you can experiment yourself with your bodily emotions, so to say, and how they can be amplified technologically. The other one is the white suit. That is maybe even more radical, because we see someone in a suit here and with a helmet on. There are all kind of things that produce also pressure on your body, and you see all kind of cables. So once you would be wrapped in this suit, you would see movies projected in front of you, and that would be pornographic movies on the one hand, and on the other hand movies of a car accident. There would be odors. With the pornographic movie there would be perfumes, and with the car crash there would be the odor of blood. And at the same time you would feel all kind of things putting you under pressure. So here you can see really that it is a kind of training device to help us deal with these technological stimuli. Good, that is how Austria, let's say Austrian architects in the 1960s and 70s experimented with this relationship to technology in ways that I think are still important to realize and to think about. Let's go now to the second part, which is about our relationship to nature, and which is about experiments in ecology. And the first project I would like to show you is a project that we're currently working on, and that we will present at the Venice Architecture Biennale. I do that together with Katharina Weinberger, and it is in the pavilion of Montenegro. Montenegro is a very tiny country of former Yugoslavia, in the south of Europe, just above Albania, just above Greece, if you want. And in this Montenegro, there is a saline, so a salt flat, where they used to produce salt, and it's called the Solana Olcin, and it looks like this. Here you see it quickly. So it is this area, and you can already see that it is completely man-made. It is even, as we will see in a minute, looks more artificial than a Dutch landscape. It's close by the sea, so they would pump up water from the sea to this saline, and it would evaporate because it's very hot there, and there's a lot of wind coming from the mountains, and because of that, it would leave them with the salt in the seawater. Now, this saline is very interesting in itself, but what is more important, here you see a map of Europe. So you see here Italy, you see here Greece, and you see here all our Solana, our salt flats. And the lines that you see, the dotted lines, are the movements of migrating birds in Europe. So birds in winter migrate to warmer areas. So the birds from Northern Europe and even Siberia and Russia would move through this area towards Africa and Asia. So even birds that you have here are basically would migrate over this route. Not that many here anymore, but to Northern Asia, that is still the case. So these birds that cross incredible distances, basically, we take a passenger jet for that, and that means that before they cross the Mediterranean, they have to rest and to eat. And where do they eat? Exactly in this saline, because with the salt water also small shrimps and organisms are pumped up, and that means that in this very shallow water the birds can feed on that. So this completely man-made environment became a crucial spot, a crucial biotope for the European, African and Asian ecology. So now, since 2012, you know probably that the Eastern Europe used to be socialist and communist. Yugoslavia was socialist, so Montenegro was one of the republics of Yugoslavia. So this saline was privatized after the Yugoslavian war, and in 2012 it went bankrupt, because in a communist country you can have a monopoly on certain things, so all Yugoslavians would eat this salt and you could keep the price on an artificial level, but in a global economy there's much cheaper salt from all kind of other places. So this could not work immediately as a saline anymore. Now here you see this landscape, this very flat landscape with sometimes very strange futuristic machines in it that Australians would probably produce movies about. Here you can see this landscape more close up. So this is the salt. These are the particular plants that grow on that. So you also have certain plants that we would eat that grow on that salt, and that also produce different colors throughout the year, as you can see already here. You have cows there that maintain these very narrow dikes between the different areas. There's also mud that has medical applications and is actually very expensive. And Well, here again, the beauty of it, that is in its artificiality. So you have a completely artificial biotope that has become absolutely crucial for wildlife. If this doesn't function anymore, or it is not functioning at the moment, then within a couple of years that could be the death of millions of birds actually. So it is absolutely crucial to maintain this saline, but for that we have to make new plans. So this is one of these machines. It's kind of Mad Max kind of thing, as you can see. And this is the salt that could not be sold anymore as it is laying around. So what we do is that we invited 3 offices, and a 4th office will come from a competition among architects in Montenegro. And we ask architects that already dealt with similar issues to make projects for this saline as a spatial strategies in order that this saline can again function as a saline, but also there are other kind of measures being taken to protect it because there's a whole new development in tourism along the coast, for example, that there are new functions, for example, bird watching or maybe light forms of tourism taking place there so that this saline can work again. So one of them is Laak. That's an office in Innsbruck. I'll show you a little bit later. So these are the mountains around Innsbruck, and the platform that you see there, this viewing platform, is the highest point in Tyrol where you can have a look over the landscape. They did that. And in Innsbruck, and I'll speak a little bit more about this afterwards, is this square, which is a very particular square in the center of the city. And on one hand, it is a square that is there for all kinds of purposes of the province that can march there with the militaries and all kinds of other things. But there are also monuments on that side, monuments for different groups from the Second World War, for Jews, for resistance fighters, etc. They cannot be moved because then you have to ask all the allies. So they did, underneath there is a parking garage. So they did this new square, and in Innsbruck that has become a very important new center for skateboarding in the world. But I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Other office we invited is Lola, Lost Landscapes, a Dutch office. And this is, of course, the Dutch have much more experience in dealing with an artificial landscape and, let's say, the artificial biotopes and ecologies it produces, because the Dutch we have our polders that are completely man-made, but that at a certain point also developed a new biotopes and ecologies, and also at a certain point when these polders did not work anymore because they could not compete with the agricultural production in other parts of the world. You see the same thing, parts of it were given back to nature. So here you see in red a delta in the Netherlands that is might have become well known. And you see that it is closed off by dams because otherwise there would be enormous floodings and increasingly so because of global warming. So you can imagine that the water here doesn't flow through anymore with the flood and the ebb and low tide. So that basically the water stands still there. And intriguingly, the water dies, and that produces a very strange situation. You get a kind of slime that develops there. Here you see this water. You can see that it is in use for leisure purposes, but basically underneath there is this white slime that grows every year with half a meter to a meter, and of course is not very healthy. So the idea is that you would have to open up this area again. Here you can imagine that it is also important again for nature purposes, for birds, etc. So Lola made a plan for that. There will be a lock here so that there is again the possibility of the water to flow in and out. You probably know that when you can easily manipulate a delta in the sense that you can produce artificial islands. If you just put an obstacle here, an island will grow in it. So you get a quasi-natural new delta that develops there. That is also, as you can see, becomes green because the water becomes healthy again. And you get all kinds of new opportunities for leisure, because leisure is increasingly important industry in the world. It's the first industry in the world, the leisure industry. And in this part in the west of the Netherlands, there are particularly in these villages that are not partly historical villages, partly resorts. There are mainly Germans coming there because it's the closest, it's the shortest distance for them to the sea. So you see a completely new landscape that is on the one hand, let's say ecologically sustainable, and at the same time offers all kinds of opportunities for leisure. So this is the experience of Lola. So here you would see how that would develop. And also they make a project for this saline in Montenegro, so that you can also see a project of theirs in Venice. And then the last group we invited is Ecology Studio. The three offices are consciously very different from each other to generate as many ideas as possible. And Ecology Studio is from London, even if it's two Italians from Turin, Marco Poletto and Claudio Pasquero. But they have their office in London and they teach at the AA and at the Bartlett. And they have dealt before with also a large area on the Baltic Sea, that is the sea next to St. Petersburg in the north of Europe, so next to Russia and next to Finland. And this Baltic Sea, because of global warming, there are algae growing there. And these algae are an immense problem on the one hand. On the other hand, because this global warming will not quickly stop, the question is what to do with them. You can't really remove them. And so people have been thinking that they could be made productive for all kinds of things. You could eat them, you could develop things out of them, food production, etc., etc. So their proposal is in this area, and you can imagine it's very cold there, or I don't even if you can imagine how cold it gets there. So it's very thinly populated. There are all kinds of villages that used to live from fishing that can't do that anymore. So it is a kind of project that addresses this kind of small-scale development. There will be algae farms actually also on the land that take these algae that grow there and develop new products out of them. And to do that, they do not build a big factories or huge organizations, but they rely much more on a kind of local networks. So also here you see how a problem is taken, in this case, much more on the level of chemicals and biology, and how that is turned into a new product maybe, and how that new product, through new forms of networking in that area, then becomes a new industry, and this is the way how it would appear in the landscape. I do not know where the white lines come from, I'm sorry. The interesting thing is, of course, for a Biennale, you always have to think how to present that. So Ecology Studio do these kind of installations in which you could actually then experience what it would be to drink from these algae that are farmed there on the spot. So 3 offices. Then, of course, you may have heard that the Biennale the theme is reporting from the front. So a lot of people are dealing with housing or housing for refugees or slums or whatever. We took this issue of the birds that are under threat. And you have to imagine that this saline, this Solana ulcini in Montenegro is very controversial. On the one hand, at the moment, there are the investors, the current owners of that site, that want to develop it into a resort, a big-scale resort, and that would mean that it is gone. On the other hand, you have the NGOs that want to protect the nature and do not want to change anything. So both is not really possible. So for that reason, it is not just that we ask these architects to make project. But we also organized 3 symposia. So just 2 weeks ago, 1.5 weeks ago actually, there was the first symposium in Montenegro, in which there were all kind of Montenegrin men. They can be very, how do you say that, a macho man, and they started screaming and whatever about what we are doing. So you can see that it is very emotional on the one hand, on the other hand very political. Then there might be corruption involved and whatever. So the idea is to have these 3 symposia. One is the first in which this brief is handed out, and the population of Montenegro and of the city nearby could react to this brief and correct or amend this brief. The second one will be in Venice, where this project will be, of course, and the whole issue of the conflict about this Solana will be presented at the Biennale. And the third symposium is again in Montenegro, where the projects will be presented, and then in such a way so that the population in Montenegro can judge what they can use from these projects and what not. So you see that a rather complex project that is very exciting to work on. It also means that every day I get emails from people that are very critical, but anyway. So last thing I want to show you is about Innsbruck, because when it is about an exchange here, it is basically Innsbruck is in the mountains. It's a city in the Alps, as you have already seen, and large, a very important source of income is tourism. In winter, skiing tourism, winter sports, so skiing, snowboarding, langlaufen, etc., etc. And in summer, it's also the mountains are for hiking and other forms of tourism. So for a long time, you can imagine, or I don't know if you can imagine, but let's say these mountains that are really impressive were thought as the symbol for nature. So that means that this would be the idea of an ecology. You had all kind of birds. You have, of course, this ecology in the end with the predators that are on top of it that would produce these kind of circular food chains. And then, of course, traditionally it would be the idea that that when we are in the current situation, it is man who basically, as if he is kind of playing with it, controls it. And so man seems to be above all this. But if you look at it, that is of course very strange, because if you look at this nature in reality, you walk around there, even if you're in a nature park, and you see these backpackers walking around and so on. You see some huts where you can spend the night or have some food or meet people. So basically, if you're honest, also today, this ecology also involves humans. And of course, because also in Europe the population has grown, and the leisure not so much the leisure time, but the amount of money people spend in leisure has increased. You see that this nature is increasingly under pressure. So to return to Guattari, so you get basically a new situation in which you have an ecology that is produced by nature, but just as much by myth, sages, fables, fairy tales, invented traditions, so not traditions that are real. Most traditions in Europe have been invented in the period that the nation state came into being, and of course recently by marketing. So if we look at how that developed, here you see skiing around Innsbruck between 1950 and today. So here you see the landscape, on the bottom you see Innsbruck around 1950 with a few ski tracks, not many. Then you see here 1964 the first Olympic Winter Games in Innsbruck. You see that a whole lot of new pistes are built, and not just that, but these Olympic Winter Games, like many Olympic Games, were used to enlarge the housing stock in Innsbruck. So you also see the city grow. And then we come here to Innsbruck today, and you can see that there's hardly any mountain where there is no skiing track. And then we only speak about skiing. So that changes, of course, and you can even see it because with global warming, there's not that much snow anymore. So you see these artificial ski pistes. If we look at it, and Tyrol is very proud of its nature, when you look at it, how much nature is still left, that is not much. So this is the state forest, and how it was reduced in the course of time under the impact of humans. And you can see that there on the right, even in this nature park, in this nature reserve, there's not much nature left. Because if you have a nature reserve, you have to maintain it. To maintain it, you have to enable people to go there, to experience it. So you need trails and huts, and I don't know what. And so step by step, they attract more people again, and at a certain point, the nature that you wanted to protect is completely gone. This is the most important mountain in Innsbruck, that Innsbruck is very proud of. You are very proud when you have a view on it, so buildings are built so you have a view on it. And also that is known that is really sublime nature. But if you look at it, this is how it looks in winter, the time. And you can already see here, I hope you can see that there are buildings here and here where there are lifts going up. You see probably these lines, that is avalanche protection. So you see that already a large part there is covered. And then here and here, and also to the right and to the right and to the left, there are ski pistes. So basically, you see that there also here there's not much nature left. If you go in history, that is nothing new. So it's not a recent development. Here again, you see this Nordkette with the avalanche protection. Not all the avalanche protection is very good to see because sometimes it's just a ditch in which the avalanche falls and stops. But you have also every morning when it is a bit too warm, and of course with global warming every morning is too warm for the snow, they have explosions by which they release artificial avalanches, because otherwise at a certain unforeseen moment they would kill too many tourists, and that would cost money. So that does not happen. So actually, when you look at this mountain, all you look in the history, there are mines, underground mines. The forest on these mountains is a production forest, so it's also culturally defined. So also, if you look at it, even these mountains are for about 95% artificial and man-made. So that produces a very different idea about what these mountains are. So the snow that you see on most pistes these days is completely artificial. It's produced by snow cannons that freeze the snow and spray it artificially, and that produce a kind of white lines on these mountains. So there's the so-called snow management, as it's called, because for all kinds of different kinds of skiing you need different pistes. So this is the regular skiing, and here you see you have little hills for if you're very good and you have short skis, or for snowboarders they can go down there as an extra challenge. So you have all kinds of pistes that are made for particular leisure behavior. So you can see that this whole mountain is completely designed. And you see all the tools there. This is, for example, a half pipe, also for snowboarding, like skateboarding, you have a half pipe. So there is a really big intervention in this mountain to produce this half pipe. And you can see how artificial it looks, particularly at night when it is artificially lit. You need things like that get more and more specific, like the ski jump, and you suddenly see Zaha Hadid again. And so you have this ski jump that is basically only there's only one tournament, one serious tournament a year, but for that the ski jump is built because they also train in summer, so when there's no snow, you can kind of artificial grass with water on which these people can land. Or you have here you see it again, this ski jump. There's and that is basically for an event once a year. Or you have this so-called Hungerburgbahn, a train that goes up the mountain very steeply from the center of Innsbruck. So here you have the station in the center. So you mounted the train there. It goes up the mountain. It can do that these days in a curve. There's another stop, and in the end you end up here. And it is intriguing because this train only takes about 60 people at a time, so that is not much. And basically, you can go there by bus as well. That takes also 15 minutes and is much cheaper. You can go there by car. So there are many other ways to go there. So basically, the intriguing thing is this cable car is not really developed for functional reasons, but for symbolic reasons. So basically, this cable car, and you can imagine that it is very expensive, paid itself back in about half a year since it was constructed, because all European newspapers wrote about it. So that is produces a kind of city marketing for which this architecture is used, and for which Zaha Hadid is really very interesting. So basically we see that this valley in which Innsbruck is largely artificial. When we go back in history, Patrick Geddes, one of the kind of pioneers of the survey, a sociologist and planner, made this kind of idealized section of a valley on top, where you see all the kind of different trades distributed over the different positions in the landscape. In the 1950s, we see Allison and Peter Smithson that make again a valley section, but you see that the city has grown, that there's industry, that there are villages around it in the mountains, there's a bigger bridge over the river. There are all kind of things also happening already on the slopes. And on the bottom, you see the last stage, that's done by Michael Stowe, where you see that again this section has changed. The city has become bigger. It's not just a church anymore that dominates it, but there's now also a mosque. You have the bridge, you have the villages, you have individual houses. You suddenly see the landscaping here on the mountain. You have all kinds of sports. Also this, you have what is very popular now is people that either start just jump off a mountain with a parachute or a hang glider, or you have combinations of skiing and snowboarding with that. So you see that the whole landscape and even the air is used for leisure activities largely. So that is an incredible change. And why does that take up such enormous pieces of the landscape? To look at that, Michael Stowe looked at time geography, which was basically used to show how a traditional village by Hegerstrand, a Norwegian